meeting of the Southampton Village ZBA, April 2017, is now open. We have some decisions. We also have one adjournment. Case number 2944, the Village of Southampton, Gin Lane, has a letter requesting an adjournment till the May meeting.
I move we adjourn 2944.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. Then we've got four decisions. First one is 2954, Anthony Gugliotta, 161 Elm Street.
I move we accept this decision as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Case number 2958, Hampton's Real Property LLC, number 17 Squabble Lane.
I move we accept this decision as proposed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we have two regarding the wetlands. The first one being 2956, Greenblatt 2015 Trust 1990 Meadow Lane.
I move we accept this decision as proposed.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
On 2957, 640 Ox Pasture, we have a slight change.
Yes, just an edit, Mr. Chairman. You'll note that there was a underlined portion about a proposed retaining wall being of fieldstone. We did receive a plan that showed that. So for the third bullet under number 1 on page 2, the date of that plan can be changed from 3/8 to 3/27, and then everything will be consistent. So if we could make that modification, I can submit that to the office for the record, and I've made a notation on my plan tonight.
What was that date again?
27th. March 27th instead
As
of
opposed to March 3rd?
Yes, it's the third bullet.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it was the 8th, March 8th.
I move to accept this decision as amended by Mr. Voorhees.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's the decision on
Just the wetlands.
wetlands.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
Thank you.
That brings us down to the one pending case, which is 2959, number 71 Teacups Lane LLC, number 71 South Main Street. For the applicant.
2959.
No one for the applicant.
There it is. There it is.
At the hearing last month,
There's no one.
there was some discussion about substantial changes to the plan,
That was the one with moving the pool.
and everybody, the board and Chick seemed to be in favor of them revising the plan. Maybe they didn't realize they should have sent in a request for an adjournment, because they're probably going to have to be re-advertised, but there's no point in him coming in until they've made the revision, so might as well just adjourn it.
Okay.
I move we adjourn 2959.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No, give me
You want to give that back?
the one new case.
Bring this one back. Files here. And cases.
Well, the new cases, the first one is 2960 Aaron Dannenberg, 116 Willow Street.
Jeffrey, I'm an architect representing Aaron and Felice Dannenberg for their house on 116 Willow Street. We have an existing cottage that is a non-conforming front yard setback as the house exists right now. And what we're looking to do is add a two-story addition to one side of the property And due to the location of the house and the existing entry, there's not many other places for us to accommodate the footprint of what they're looking to add, and also maintain the historical and the architectural quality of the front facade of the house. So we're asking for a front yard variance of approximately 55 square feet per floor for a total of 110 square feet of total heated area in front of the required 30-foot front yard setback. There are no pyramid issues. Everything falls within the pyramid height restrictions. And it's the only really thing that is an issue with what we're proposing.
They're also asking for a lot coverage variance.
I was told that that was not an issue, that actually the 1,400, I was told by the building inspector that it was not an issue actually with this zone. He called me and let me know that.
So you, I don't know. But we can hear the application, but you should.
You want to see that, though, right?
I asked him if I needed to amend the application or the letter that, the description of what we're asking for, and he said it wasn't an issue because I had them separated clearly in the application in terms of what we're stating, and as long
Well,
as...
then it'd be re-advertised, but
You want to see it?
we don't see it.
See,
The lot coverage.
Were you not applying the correct lot coverage formula? Or
well, I was told the incorrect coverage, and then that's when he called and told me what the correct one was. And due to what the actual stipulation is, that it wasn't, that we were no longer required to ask for that variance.
Right, but is the lot coverage changing?
Slightly. It is changing, but we're still within the threshold.
Okay, then you'll need to have your,
If you look on the letter
we
that,
can hear your application, but we can't render a decision until we have, you need to, if the survey that you filed exceeds the lot coverage requirement, then you need to,
but it doesn't. What I'm saying
oh, that's
is,
what I asked you.
what happened is that originally when I was told what the zoning was and what the lot coverage was for this parcel, I was told an incorrect number. When I submitted the application and said that that the existing is 2550 or 21.9%, and I was told that it was a 20% coverage. We are going up from 2330, and then the building inspector called me and said that that was incorrect, and we are still within, way below the required lot coverage for the parcel.
In other words, these two numbers here are incorrect. It says the lot coverage
They are correct, but they're
1.9, and now it's going to be 23.8.
correct, and they're still under the 15% plus the 1,400 requirement.
What is the lot coverage here, though?
The lot coverage right now
It's
is,
supposed to be, I mean.
in terms of the requirement by code,
Yeah.
15% plus 1,400.
Well, that's not the percentage for lot coverage, that's what you're allowed to build, that's the floor area.
Now, there's, okay, the lot coverage requirement is 14% of the lot area plus 1,500 square feet.
Right.
Okay.
So apparently
Apparently
they didn't realize that when you, but I haven't done the math, but we can do the math.
Even with that threshold, and I spoke to the building inspector, we are below the requirement with what we're proposing for that coverage.
Okay, I haven't got my calculator with me, but I'm going to make a note and I'll verify.
I'd be
that.
happy to
The
do
area
that.
is just over like 11,654 square feet. So 14% of that plus 1,500.
Correct. That's correct. I could do it on my,
I don't have a calculator with me.
Well, 14% is like 1/7, so
10% would be like 1,165.
Plus the 1,500, he's already...
Another 500.
that's 1,800
Already
plus 1,500.
2,900. He's already...
2,800.
1,500 plus 7,000 is 2,500, and he's only at...
yeah, it's 3248. is what I come up with.
All right.
And we're only asking for 2550.
Okay. Okay.
And the reason I didn't amend that was because I was told that it wasn't going to be a problem, but obviously, any clarification you want, I'd be happy to give it to you even as soon as
So
tomorrow.
if we had our calculator with us, we could do the math. We could just verify that before we act.
You want a calculator?
All right.
So if you look at the survey, I've highlighted what we're trying to achieve. The existing house is here. This is Willow Street. This is the front facade. The pink portion is the 55 square feet, which is beyond the 30-foot setback. And then the green portion is what we're adding, which is within the setback that's new. And then the yellow portion is what's existing that we're going to be basically replacing. So we're looking to add a little, basically a two-story volume here, and then a one-story new entry that's kind of hidden behind the existing building.
But even with the pink portion there, you're not going any closer to the street than the house already is, right?
No, we're actually approximately 6 feet back from where the existing house is, and what we're looking to do to maintain, because the roofs are a little tricky, this facade is actually 6 inches back beyond the existing one. And we're maintaining all their existing roof lines, detailing, siding, trim, all of that stuff is going to be coherent with the existing house. We've also confirmed that we're adding one bedroom and basically an office space, and the existing septic system is up to code for what we're trying to add.
Now there's going to be how many bedrooms?
Just one additional bedroom.
Which makes how many altogether?
That will be
Four.
4.
So did you have 3 parking spaces?
So you need 3 parking spaces.
Yeah, we
More than
can-
that.
we can accommodate that also.
What do you heat with? What will you heat with? You don't have any buried oil tanks on the property, do you?
No.
No.
We
Pool
do,
house. That's not used for sleeping or anything like that, is it?
no, it's shut down in the winter and has no,
Any other questions?
Don't.
Rick, any questions? Is there anyone out in the public who'd like to be heard to this application on Lower Street? No, so you want to close the decision?
Close of a decision.
I move we close this application for decision.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. We'll have a decision in May.
Excellent. Would you like me to circle back with the lot coverage
No, you don't.
clarification?
No, we eyeballed it.
All we need to do is use the calculator before we do our decision.
Perfect. Okay, well, thank you very much.
thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Good evening.
On the application of case number 2961, Thomas M. Fitzgerald III, 352 Captain's Neck Lane.
Good evening for the applicant, John Bennett, and Tim Rumpf from Aries Design, principal of Aries Design, is with me this evening. We're not proposing any improvements to the property. We're talking about revegetating a portion of wetlands that was unfortunately cleared, so we're trying to rectify the situation.
That was what?
Cleared.
Fortunately cleared?
Unfortunately cleared. So what I have is a copy, what I'm handing to you now is a copy of, or copies, I should say, of a revised planting plan. It doesn't change anything that, it changes nothing from the planting plan that was filed with the application. However, what it does do is put on the site plan a prior wetlands boundary that was flagged over approximately 27 years ago. Yeah, so, right? Is that right? Yeah, 27 years ago. So again, we submit, this revegetation plan was submitted, and I'll have,
Not the one that was just submitted.
Oh, you're going to,
Look, the one that was just submitted is the same, there's no change in the proposed revegetation, but I thought it important to show on this the wetlands line from 1990, which I'm going to talk to you about in a bit. This property was the subject of a moratorium exemption back, you'll all remember, before you had the wetlands jurisdiction, the village trustees had the wetlands jurisdiction. And when that application to the trustees was made, there was a wetlands line flag. That was 27 years ago. And a wetlands change, as we all know, in my years of doing this, it usually changes to the detriment of my client's provision. This is probably one of those indications where actually the wetlands line has changed and become less problematic for the client. So in any event, back in 1990, a wetlands line was flagged, and Tim may be able to talk to you a little bit about the history of this, because I think he was involved in the permitting for the pond, right? And when that wetlands line was flagged and a village trustee wetlands moratorium exemption permit was issued, there was a covenant required. And the covenant had a copy attached as an exhibit. You'll see that in the covenant, which I submitted as part of my application. It had an exhibit that showed a wetlands line on the covenant. And what I'm indicating on this wetlands line, which is an exhibit to the covenant, this wetlands line here, we have put on, Mr. Rumpf has put on his site plan. That was missing from the site plan.
That was the covenanted?
That was the covenanted line.
Okay.
Exactly. So what we're here for is two things. One, to revegetate the wetland, and Tim will talk to you about the methodology and how he proposes to do that, to get things back to where they should be. But we're also asking for relief from the covenant, because, or to amend the covenant, however you want to do it, because the wetlands line is not there. The wetlands line is here, as shown on the most recent flagging. Now, I think you have the power to do this. I'll defer to Rick, but you are the successor authority to the village trustees in terms of the wetlands law, so I would think it would be in your power to amend the covenant. But again, that's a discussion that I can have with Mr. DePietris. But suffice to say, we are here asking for an amendment in the covenant to put the wetlands line back to where it is, number one, but also to revegetate in the area that was unfortunately cleared. If we were here trying to add or change or alter the improvements on the property, we would be showing you a buffer. Because, of course, when you're adding improvements to the property, it's an appropriate nexus to ask for a buffer, an appropriate condition. But we're not here doing that. We certainly understand that if at any time in the future Mr. Fitzgerald comes in and asks to change or modify or alter the improvements on the property, we're going to have to offer a buffer. But right now, what we'd like to do is revegetate the wetlands and revegetate them as per a wetlands line that is approximately 3 or 4 years old. Of course, Mr. Voorhees may want to check that, but 3 or 4 years old as opposed to 27 years old. I thought Tim might be able to help us with the proposal for the revegetation. Maybe if you think it's appropriate, Tim, talk a little bit about the history of the property and the way the pond was created.
It was created, yeah. Mr. Chairman, board members, Tim Rumpf from Harris Design. Probably back in the late 80s, Maurice Cunningham owned the site. There were no houses around at that point, and we had gotten approval from the DEC and the village to basically create that pond. So that pond is approximately 30 years old. We removed Phragmites and dug the pond.
Does that have a liner?
What's that?
Is there a liner?
No. It's just part of the creek. There's that swale that runs down in the middle of these properties that goes north and south. And that's how I was, involved with the project 30 years ago. The Fitzgeralds called us 3 or 4 years ago when we started to just talk about what that pond was and how it was created. And then last fall, his landscape contractor inadvertently went into the wetlands and cleared them. So what we're proposing to do is, you'll see the green hatched area is now what is the Phragmites that was taken down. We're asking permission to put a root barrier in the Phragmites on the upland side of that, and then planting switchgrass and various sedges as we move upland to recreate that wetland area. Based on the present surveyed wetlands line, which is on a survey that I believe it was Dollar Associates did, and Mr. Voorhees flagged that wetlands line in 2013.
Do you have any information on how he cleared it? Was it like with a backhoe or?
It was with a machine. I was called down to the site after it was done, after the building department notified Mr. Fitzgerald.
So they like dug out the roots and everything? So,
No,
no?
they just cleared it down to grade with a machine. With a
Like
skid
mowed it,
steer.
you mean? Like,
What's that?
it's like mowed it down, like,
No, they were actually clearing it, taking it out, chopping it out, and
Okay.
chopping out the roots are still there.
And certainly the Fitzgerald are very apologetic about it. It's clearly something that was inadvertent. It wasn't directed by them to be done. It would be foolish of them to do that. There's no hiding the fact that there was a covenanted wetland line there, so it would be very foolish to attempt to try to do this to any benefit, because the line is there,
I
Oh,
it's
was
set in
just curious
stone.
because, did he damage anything?
No, I wanted to, I understand, and I appreciate that, Mr. Guzowitz. I just wanted to let the board know that it was an error of a contractor, because it was a covenant wetland line, so no one's fooling anybody. It's not to anyone's benefit. It wasn't like he was going to be able to go out there and somehow, alter this thing without any consequence. So, again, while ultimately, of course, it's his responsibility, it was not done by him directly. However, we are back here to remedy the situation. Tim has proposed a very, what I would suggest, sympathetic plan. We would, however, like to amend the covenant to provide that the wetlands line is the more current line, not the 27-year-old line. And again, if we were here attempting to add improvements, alter improvements, amend or change the improvements, we'd be proposing a buffer, but there's no intention to do that. So there's nothing in my humble legal opinion that triggers what you would usually appropriately ask for, which is, give me a buffer. You're putting additional improvements there. You're going to have more septic. You're going to have more bedrooms. You're going to have more improvements on the property. You want something back in mitigation. But here, there's no request for any improvements. We just want to come back in and put the wetlands back the way it should be.
Are we going to have some like an area that can't be mowed? Like a no-mow zone?
Well, I would say, as I say, that I would think that would be appropriate if they were asking for improvements, but we're not asking for any improvements. We're simply asking to revegetate the wetlands.
Is the idea to put in native plants that'll prevent the Phragmites from re-establishing in that area?
Well, I think it's twofold. Part of that is the root barrier that's going to prevent them the roots and stones to move upland.
Is that with the coral logs? Or
No,
how-
this is an actual barrier that goes down into the soil, down to the groundwater, and prevents the roots from moving forward. It's something similar we use for bamboo, to corral bamboo. did not,
What's
have
that made
it.
out of? Is that like-
It's a plastic,
Oh, okay.
yeah. It's rolled out and you trench it and you put it into the ground. We've used it in other areas in the village.
This was not unusual when the when the trustees were first doing these, and I offer, please take a look at the covenant. But when the trustees were first doing these wetlands moratoriums, they were primarily concerned with wetland setbacks. We did quite a few of them, and there was no buffer required. All this covenant says is you stay out of the wetlands area, which is delineated on this. I'm not suggesting that you would do that. You don't do that these days. You require some buffer. But when the trustees back in the 90s were doing this, I remember getting quite a few of those wetlands exemptions, and the trustees were just concerned with the setback. So many of these structures...
The wetlands themselves.
Setbacks in the wetlands themselves, yeah. So many of these, I remember doing a couple of them down at the end of, not Meadowmere Place, where the buildings were set back 125 and 150 feet, but there was no revegetation required. And that's what happened in this case. This covenant says stay out of the wetlands, not any portion of the upland. So we're trying to bring this back to what this covenant required, with the exception of...
When they did this clearance, did they stay out of the wetlands? Or did
No,
They didn't?
they
They went into
didn't.
the
No, they did not.
They went
No.
into the wetlands.
They went into the wetlands. No, there's no... It's obvious. You could drive down there, you can see it. I think Mr. Voorhees saw it today. But, and again, as I say, if we were here to add improvements, I would be suggesting that there be a buffer, but I don't think that there's any... I just want to bring this back to where it was.
Where it was.
Yeah, yes. Quite candidly, the Fitzgeralds are working on some potential redevelopment plans for the property, and I've told them at that time that they're going to actually have to provide a buffer, a no-mow zone.
The wetlands line was, the most current was 2013. Should we have it updated before you?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah, of course. There were no stakes in the field, I guess, Chick. I don't know if you're...
There were a couple of stakes still.
Yeah. I don't know if it was generally, I wouldn't speculate. We can, would you like to go down and flag it again, or take a look at it again? Or? Let's talk about that, okay.
I have a question, and of you too, Chick. Did the digging of the pond, is it possible that it kind of concentrated, made a reservoir for the water so it no longer spilled out into what might have been that old wetland?
I don't know. It was 30 years ago, the pond was dug. I can't recreate the history.
Second
I want to
question.
try and recreate some of the history when
Yeah.
we get to talking about this,
But
but
is that
I don't know
possible
about
in
that.
general? If the water flows now into a well, reservoir, it's no longer spilling out into what it used to spill out into, perhaps.
Yeah.
Second question is, has there been over the years from 2013 to now, has there been a drought in the Northeast? Did it shrink the wetland, and might it go back?
It looks to me as though some type of grading may have taken place on the property. And that's kind of what I want to
Grading.
figure out. Again, I was there in 2013, and I positioned the wetlands based on the line that's in the ARIS plan. And, I would stand by that. I just went out there independently in 2013, and that's where the wetlands appeared to be. It's interesting to me that the wetlands was further up a slope, and I can't account for that. That was done in 1992. I wasn't here, and I don't know what the conditions were at that time. So I think we should deal with the line the way it is now, but there is the issue that there was a covenanted area that's on this new plan that they were supposed to stay out of. And again, Rick may comment on this from a legal perspective, but that was a covenant on the property based on the conditions at that time. And as John said, there was not a setback from that. That was considered the wetlands, and they were not permitted to go in that area. So I think, from my perspective, a restoration should look at what was removed without proper permits. And there is evidence, and I want to check this further, but that there may have been some trees on the property that were removed. And, we should piece that together possibly through aerial photographs, possibly through records I have in my office, to determine if those should be replaced. And then there's the wetlands area that was disturbed by the current condition. And Tim has a plan to try and restore that, but I'd like to look at that, and it may be warranted to remove some soil possibly. And this is, I'm not sure that the soil there now will support the wetland species that are proposed. May have to remove some soil. It seems as though there are some Phragmites coming in beyond where the root barrier is proposed at this time. So that would also warrant soil removal and maybe get rid of those rhizomes, create a line for where the Phragmites is stopped, and we create proper soil conditions to establish better quality wetlands. And that would require a modification of this plan. And then perhaps go up to what was the covenanted area based on the trustees' decision years ago that's still in effect, really. As John said, the laws have changed.
That's accurate, yeah.
The laws have changed, but that is still in effect, and we should look at that. And then you have jurisdiction within 125 feet under the current law, and that we should determine. I think John is trying to make the case that until they come in and do structural changes to the property, maybe then we may look at expanded buffer areas.
I have another question for you. I mean, if you look this in Google Earth or just from knowing this area, it seems like that's a natural low-lying drainage area that goes all the way down into Cooper's Pond. Maybe when it's flooding or high tide conditions or a wet spring, that water may flow from this across this property and continue all the way through. And then what you plant here, is that going to have an effect on neighboring properties? That would be a concern.
There's a slope that goes, right now, there's a slope that goes down. The slope is all grass. It's basically all lawn. And it ends in what's basically a cut area in the lawn that appears to be what was the limit of wetlands back in 2013. And that's where this disturbance took place, into that wetland area. So I totally agree that what happens on that lawn area, goes down a slope and can impact the pond, the wetlands, and then down stream areas. I will say that it has not been a high-quality wetland in a long time because of Phragmites encroachment and probably just what occurred as sedimentation throughout that basin. But, I think that, it would be a good idea to try and create some additional buffer, even under what's being proposed now. I mean, we're basically addressing a violation, and it's a twofold violation. It's a violation of the covenanted area on the property, as well as a wetlands area that was flagged in 2013. So, that's pretty serious to me, and we want a good restoration plan. And then if there were trees that were removed within the 125-foot setback area, I think those should be replaced in some fashion as well, because those help to stabilize soil and control, provide shading, provide habitat, stabilize soil. So that's why I think we need to kind of look at this as much as we can historically through aerial photographs and any other records. I think that these guys should be looking at a plan that at least restores the area that the trustees required to be retained, subject to Rick's input, and, we need to continue considering this. Yeah, I'm not ready to, I have questions on this plan.
So what we'll do is we'll help Chick with any information that we have. I think I'm, based upon what I think is fairly obvious recommendations from Chick, what I'm hearing, Tim and I will go back to the client and talk about a restoration plan that encompasses the original covenanted line, because, yes, I'm not arguing, I'm not arguing that there isn't a violation of the covenant. The covenant did have a line on it, and that line wasn't respected. I think that line is no longer the wetlands line, but the better way to have done it would have been to come in and ask for the covenant change, because I'm not going to argue, and then propose something. I'm not going to argue that there's not a violation of the covenant. That's why we're here. So what I think we'll do, subject to any comments that Rick or any of the board members will have, we'll go back and talk to, Tim, I don't know how you feel about it, go back and talk to the client about, at a minimum, establishing some,
The question I have is like,
so, if I may just
we know the
finish.
wetlands have been, cleared, the machine worked in there. And I've heard now some trees have come down. Do we have any documentation of how many trees and where they were?
I wasn't there when there were trees, there, so I don't know.
We're all after the fact, we're
Okay,
coming
but I
in
mean-
after the fact of this stuff, yeah.
Okay.
So we're just trying to, our goal is to try to remedy the situation to,
But I think with aerial photographs, as Chip was suggesting, we can kind of recreate that, but the idea of going back to that covenant line is I think something that John and I will take back to our client and recommend that we do that.
we'll recommend that.
Yeah.
We have a series of letters here from neighbors, basically claiming the same thing, which we have discussed here, that trees were taken down, screening was removed, areas of the pond were filled in, and these letters come from neighbors at 59 Boyson Road, 366 Captain's Neck Lane, the Wombles, who I believe are on Boyson. No, they're on Captain's Neck, I'm sorry.
Boyson.
On Boyson, right the first time, yeah. And from the Lawrences at 400 Great Plains Road. That's the Lawrences again. This is from Kim White, who was a neighbor. 59 Boyson. Another one from the Lawrences, and one from Patricia H. Nodisi, who lives at 1116 Boyson.
It seems like you have a lot of neighbors,
I
police
was
and
just going to say,
whatever.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to get copies
One
of all
from the
those letters.
Abrams at 117 Boyson.
I'm going to get copies of all those letters. I'm going to send them to my client and make sure that he and she add all those addresses to their Christmas card list.
I think that's going to satisfy it. I'm not going to satisfy with a Christmas card.
I know.
Whatever you do is going to be well noted.
You know what? If you can't laugh, you're lost. So, in any event, thank you. I'll take all that
I see
back.
why they're concerned about it.
I understand.
There's a lot of concern here.
I understand. That's why we're here.
Work is going to be done to remedy this.
The only thing that I will add is that I don't know where those trees were, so, and we'll have to try to figure that out with you, Chick.
Yes.
Just remember, of course, everybody, that this was a covenant that said stay out of the wetlands area. It did not have a buffer. That doesn't excuse what was going on here, but if there were trees removed that were outside of that originally covenanted area, I don't see that as any sort of, certainly not an infraction of the covenant.
From what Chick says, we have jurisdiction with 125 feet.
Well, I would
beg to differ with
No.
John's statement.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not in violation of a covenant if the covenant doesn't have a,
But you're in violation of the code.
Right.
it would depend upon what was being removed. But we can talk about all of this.
Is there anything else?
No.
Is there anyone
We
from
have
the
some
public
homework.
who'd like to speak to this?
I'm sorry, let me just make a couple of
Oh,
quick
okay.
comments. You don't need relief from the covenant in order to revegetate.
Up to the covenant line.
You need a special permit from the zoning board, but you don't need relief from the covenant. So I'm a little confused. Are you asking to change your application doesn't say what relief you're requesting from?
Yes, what the
You're
relief-
asking to change the line.
The relief that I was requesting, but now seems unlikely to happen, was to change the line in the covenant, so that would have required an amendment to the covenant, I'm sure you agree. The likelihood of that happening, it doesn't need you don't need a weatherman to see which way the wind's blowing. So, yeah, you're right. But for the fact that the original application asked the covenant to be amended, which would have been required to change the wetlands line.
Is there any question here that fines should be imposed for this clearing?
Here's something that.
Maybe I'm asking the wrong attorney.
Yeah, no. Here's something that I'm gonna say. If everyone wants to go through an inventory of the village of Southampton, want to go up and down Meadow Lane, for example, where in the April and May months, there's more Whitmore trucks and Charlie Martyr trucks going down there, putting enough trees in to reforest Venezuela every year. If everyone wants to come clean with all the wetlands violations, I'm not aware of any fine that's been imposed on anybody in this village for a village wetlands violation. So we're here to try to make the situation better. I think people should be careful, people in glass houses should be careful, because there are numerous instances of wetlands violations, including in this neighborhood, which I'm gentleman enough not to bring up. So
far.
Excuse me?
So far.
Well, no, I don't think it's worth going there. But I think and I'm not talking about you, Mr. Chairman, but from what I think people should be cautious of the level of righteousness that they may have about this sort of thing, because there are, throughout the estate area, people who do not observe these lines.
In other words, you're saying that no fine should be imposed?
I don't believe there should be. I think
Rick,
we're here.
what's
I think we're here to.
Everybody does it. Why should they be fined?
Well, maybe more is if the village has to get involved reestablishing wetland lines, and there's labor and work that's done on the village's part, that maybe your client should be responsible for that portion of it.
What portion was that? Oh,
Let's say
Well,
Chick has to go down, he has to
Oh, he-
examine the site.
well,
he's got
that's-
a
he
state
gets his-
line.
That usually is
it comes to
passed
the bill
through.
anyway.
Okay.
Yeah. Mr. Voorhees' time and
So as
cost
long
is
as the
passed
village is
anyway.
covered, that's,
Yeah, no, I don't have any issues paying that. I couldn't.
Rick, is there any chance about fines, or any, has it been done before, or?
Well, it's not something that's really within the zoning board's jurisdiction. The purpose of a fine for a violation is to induce an owner to comply, where they have come forth and proposed to comply through a permit from you guys that would cure the violation. Then it's a matter for the village enforcement departments whether they still want to go to court to pursue a fine.
Is it within our power to ask for a bond for performance?
Yes, you can impose a bond as a requirement. You frequently do on wetland special permits.
Yeah, that's often is the case, yes.
Come on up, we'll separate.
Good evening, Madeline Van John from Tarbert and Leicester, representing a number of the neighbors to the property. I'm just going to pass up a letter to submit to the record, and there's copies for everyone there. There's a number of documents that I think may be helpful in some of the discussions as to what trees and things may have disappeared. The first thing I wanted to address, it was stated that the application didn't say what relief exactly was requested from the covenant, so we didn't know that until right now, that what he was asking for was to move the covenant line. So I just wanted to address that quickly. We feel pretty strongly that he shouldn't be rewarded for this accidental or unfortunate, I believe it was characterized as clearing of the wetlands
Extra
by...
one of these for Chick?
Yes.
oh, sorry.
You have a copy for me. Typically present your office with anything that I've submitted.
Anyway, as I was saying, so we didn't learn until tonight that the relief that was sought from the covenant was to actually have the protected covenant line moved closer into the wetlands and protect less area, so we are absolutely opposed to that. Initially, so if you look in the documents that I've submitted, the first thing is Exhibit 1, which shows, this is the New York State DEC wetlands. The DEC classifies this as a Class 1 wetland, which is the most significant kind of wetlands and considered the most productive. They're very important for groundwater recharge. And as you can see from the second map, it is part of Taylor's Creek, which...
Can we see that map? Yeah, could you put the map on that table so it faces us, and then they can pick it up with the TV camera?
Okay. That's Exhibit 1 that I submitted to the record, and that's the New York State DEC map, which the subject property is marked with the red dot, and that shows that even though this particular pond was dug out and expanded at some point, the entire wetland is part of a larger system, so it's not just a question of this particular pond. And then the second map that I have shows further how that's part of a system of wetlands that goes all the way down into Shinnecock Bay. And Taylor's Creek has been called out in Southampton Town's management plan for Shinnecock Bay as being significant tributary, and that impacts the finfish and the shellfish in that area. So special care is supposed to be given to any development that would adversely affect Taylor's Creek. And this property, as you can see, has a sweeping lawn that basically goes straight down into the wetland. So any fertilizer, anything that's used on that lawn is pretty much emptying right into the wetlands. And the more vegetation that's been removed from that area, the easier it is for anything just to drip right down into the wetlands and cause harmful effects downstream. And the third exhibit basically shows an overlay of the covenant map from 1992. The wetland, the non-disturbance line is highlighted in red. And this is the most recent aerial that you can see on Google Earth. So you can see exactly how much disturbance has gone down into that area beyond the covenant. You can actually even see the bobcat on Google Earth that's down there digging out into the wetland. And that's what we have pictures of as Exhibit 5, is the digging that took place straight into the wetland there. And then the next aerial that's here, this is from the Suffolk County GIS, and that shows the differences between 2013 and 2016. So you can see the trees quite clearly there that were removed, and although those probably were not within the covenant area, they were definitely within 125 feet of the wetlands, so that does fall within your jurisdiction. Removal of any natural vegetation within or existing at the time of the law, vegetation requires a permit from your board, and nothing was appears to have been obtained there. And it's also, we just wanted to note that even though the pond was dug, the code is clear that whether something was man-made, it still applies. It's now a wetland, the regulations still apply, and the boundary, it doesn't make any difference in terms of review that the pond was dug at some point in the past. And
Can I just interrupt real quick? There is a section of the code that deals with that, and the building inspector has made some interpretations that dug ponds are not always regulated wetlands. I know of one particular case that was the case. So I just want to make sure that that statement does not go unaddressed, that there is a section of the code that deals with that.
well,
I don't know if that's the case here. I'm just saying that that would need to be looked at to verify that statement.
Well, and regardless of the state of that particular pond, clearly there are wetlands on this property that have existed, that pre-existed that pond, and that are within your jurisdiction, they're on the DEC maps. The DEC has delegated that authority to the village, within the village, but the standards of the DEC still need to be upheld. And so another issue that, on the plan, it shows that they're proposing the coconut logs, the coir logs around there, and we're opposed to that because that usually you use those when you're trying to prevent erosion and along a shoreline, and I don't see from the aerials that there's been any evidence of erosion here. And when you're putting them in there, you're kind of just blocking off the pond area. You're basically preventing the water from flowing around, so eventually that can cause more of the wetlands to dry up, the area around it to dry up, because you're containing the water to a certain area. So I think that that needs to be looked at more closely. And so Mr. Bennett also mentioned that when they're not currently proposing any kind of buffer because they're not proposing any improvements, but to me that seems sort of like just segmenting the process. That why wouldn't you go ahead and offer something now, at least to restore it? He's saying he's trying to put it back the way it was, but you can see from these aerials that this proposal doesn't come close to putting it back the way it was. The natural vegetation extended much farther than how they're currently proposing, and as was mentioned, there's been fill that's been put in there that needs to be addressed, because the fact that the wetlands line has gotten further into the wetlands over the years, we don't know exactly why that is, but it certainly doesn't help if the lawn keeps getting closer and closer and that area gets maintained, then it's eventually not going to be part of the wetlands. It can be artificially moved along that way. And I mean, this owner hasn't owned the property for that many years, but even in the years that he's owned it, you can see that there's been significant fill and removal of vegetation along the way there. So again, I just wanted to highlight for the environmental issues here is that, you know, the wetland is part of a larger system of wetlands, and all of that leads out into Shinnecock Bay. It affects the fish, the other wildlife, and all of this is affecting the groundwater, because as the wetland is diminished, it loses its ability to be a natural recharge basin and to naturally help with the removal of pollutants, which is one of the DEC's key features of wetlands. So all of the neighbors are just very concerned that this wetland has been essentially destroyed, and we feel that any remediation needs to bring it back to the way it was before, and it should include some of the trees that were illegally removed. And also we are opposed to adding of the coir logs for the stabilization, because there's no risk of erosion on this property line. The property hasn't been eroding. It's not putting any structures in peril. There just doesn't seem to be any need for that. It just seems to be a way to invite further expansion of the lawn as the area around the pond dries up. That's all I have for now. I believe some of my clients would like to.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim White, and I reside at 59 Boysen Road. And first of all, I would like to strongly dispute the fact or the statement that the Fitzgeralds that it was inadvertent, the filling in of the pond. The police had to be called. There was a huge, what do you call it, John, that was on the property? Dump truck filled with soil. It was very early in the morning, during the week, in the fall, when they thought nobody was around. Fortunately, someone was there, and they put a stop on it. So to say that the client didn't know is as big a lie as you can create, in my view, and I wanted to dispute that it was inadvertent. We bought our house at 59 Boysen Road primarily because of the beauty of our property and the surrounding properties, as well as for the natural habitat of the wetlands, which we so loved. Notice the past tense. There was once an abundance of wildlife, such as blue herons, night herons, egrets, fish, and almost prehistoric-looking snapping turtles due to their large shells around and in the wetlands. The vista from our house on all sides was beautiful. However, once the Fitzgeralds moved in, the abundance of nature and the beauty and the important balance of this natural habitat and the ecosystem were destroyed as a result of their reckless actions. We want that balance completely restored by requiring the Fitzgeralds to address and repair the damage that they created. Shortly after the Fitzgeralds moved into 352 Captain's Neck, they mowed down all the vegetation in and directly around the wetlands. Furthermore, in the dead of winter, again, when they thought no one was around, my husband was there, they cut down every single tree including those that were in very close proximity to and directly bordering the wetlands. We once used to look at a forest of gorgeous, majestic trees and a much larger pond area. Now there is just an empty space which resembles a soccer field, while the pond has shrunk materially. And I also would like to inject here, I would really like to look more into the history of the pond, because I've heard that it's much older from someone that's historical society, and it has some historical significance. I would like to check on that. So to say it's 30 years and that's it, I don't think we really know, but I think it's important to understand the origin. Our house has been on the Southampton Garden Club tour, as well as a tour for the Historical Society. Hundreds of people have walked around our property during these tours. I have been in earshot of many of them, and one standard comment has always been about the strangely barren landscape on the Fitzgerald's property that faces us. Many have inquired why there is complete absence of trees and foliage on that property. There is no reasonable answer to the eyesore that is now the Fitzgerald's backyard or the shrunken pond. Yet, as much as my husband and I are dismayed over the uglification of the Fitzgerald's property, this is the least of our concerns. The most crucial element of what the Fitzgeralds have done was to upset and significantly alter a very vital part of the environment when they took it upon themselves to fill in the wetlands with soil and decimate the vegetation and trees that bordered them. This also had the deleterious impact of chasing away the rare bird life and turtles, which are a significant part of the ecosystem. The biggest crime that was committed by the Fitzgerald's actions was against environmentally critical wetlands. The wetlands associated with 352 Captain's Neck are identified as Class 1 wetlands by the New York State DEC. Class 1 wetlands are defined as having the greatest variety of environmental benefits. Evidence from the DEC strongly emphasized the need to protect and expand the wetlands, not shrink them as the Fitzgeralds did, expand them, due to their role in filtering pollutants. The consequence of raping the wetlands, therefore, not only affects the Fitzgeralds' neighbors, but the village of Southampton as well. There are far-reaching environmental consequences of tampering with and shrinking the wetlands, as the Fitzgeralds have done. All of this in this room should be outraged. It also argues for the necessity of the Fitzgerald to completely restore the wetlands to the state that they were in before they purchased 352 Captain's Neck. The Fitzgeralds can't claim ignorance about the critical importance of the wetlands. They were fully cognizant of the very strict setback rules and the sanctity of protecting the wetlands before they even purchased the house. As you have seen in many of the letters which were submitted to the ZBA board, all individuals who once considered buying 352 Captain's Neck, including the Lawrences and the Wombolds, were told by respective real estate agents that the building envelope could not be altered due to the setback rule of the wetlands. In fact, there was a covenant stipulating this attached to the title of 352 Captain's Neck. Captain's Neck was a hard sale to make, according to all the real estate agents, due to the covenant which stipulated strict adherence to those laws pertaining to the wetlands. My husband and I, and of course our architect, John David Rose, were extremely careful about adhering to the rules governing the wetlands. Even minor changes, and we purchased our house in 2010, started building in 2012. My husband and I, of course, were very careful about adhering to the rules of the wetlands. Even minor changes, like covering an existing porch, which was far from the wetlands, had to be receive approval from the village. We always applied, if it was necessary, for a variance. We did not touch the wetlands because we knew we couldn't. We were guided throughout our reconstruction process by the clear laws which dictated protection of the wetlands. Contrarily, the Fitzgeralds willfully violated those laws. We respected the beauty and the importance of the wetlands' environmental significance and the big role that it played in the ecosystem of Taylor Creek. We also noted as noted, love the magnificent bird life and other wildlife that once inhabited those wetlands. The same cannot be said of the Fitzgeralds. It is hard to fathom the Fitzgeralds' selfish disregard for the environment and their neighbors, who have always appreciated and protected the wetlands. It is also mind-boggling that they would decimate the plant life and trees surrounding the wetlands and deliberately fill them in with soil when they had full knowledge that this was strictly forbidden. Again, they purchased 352 Captain's Neck with eyes wide open regarding the wetland restrictions, which begs the question of why they deliberately harmed them. Perhaps their goal was to make the building envelope on their property appear bigger, as many have stated, in order to obtain approval to build a larger house. And I guarantee you, that will be the next thing up, permission to build a bigger house, because they wanted to make the property envelope look bigger. The lawn kept getting longer and longer and longer and longer, and now it's in the wetlands. The reason for tampering with the wetlands doesn't matter, but the impact, the significant impact that it had on the environment does. The Fitzgeralds should be made to remediate their damaging actions by, one, intensely restoring the pond wetlands to its original size before they filled it in with soil, and two, replanting the trees and vegetation surrounding the wetlands that existed before being torn down or ripped out. If not, all of us in the village will be negatively impacted.
Very nice, Kathleen. Hi, my name's John Wombold. I live at 99 Boyson Road. I've been a resident of Southampton for 25 years. 15 of those have been at the Boyson Road address. We border the subject property, 352 Captain's Neck Lane to the south. While we clearly support every property owner's rights to develop the property to the fullest potential as of right, or with variances for hardship, but the recent work at 352 Captain's Neck Lane has been egregious. When a property owner performs non-compliant, unapproved site work, irreparable damage, as detailed by Kim earlier, all the environmental damage results. I too was surprised to hear some comments earlier, like unfortunate clearing, unintentional, contractors unintentionally going into the wetlands, the changing of the wetlands line over time. It's pretty hard to sit here and listen to it. Mr. Fitzgerald unfortunately shares the same lawn groundskeeper that I have. He refused to do the work in the wetlands that Mr. Fitzgerald requested. The work that was done there on site was done by an out-of-the-village contractor from Up Island. The wetlands line was intentionally manipulated. We witnessed firsthand on 2 occasions yellow machines in there ripping up root systems, hauling it away and bringing in clean fill and using bobcats or other leveling equipment to plant lawn. The most recent was June 14th, 2016, when we saw dump trucks of fill coming in, at least 2 dump trucks with dirt, replacing the root systems and wetland plant systems that were ripped out. So it is an intentional act. It wasn't unfortunate clearing, it was an intentional clearing. And that wetlands line, if you go out and measure today, it most likely won't be the same as it was in 1990 or 92 when that line was measured, because the wetlands plants and everything else has been eradicated and replaced with soil. So that would be a frivolous act to go measure it now, because it was intentionally manipulated. I agree with all the comments affecting the natural resources that Ms. White has made, nesting places and refuge for wild animals, its effect on fin fish, shellfish, natural species, turtles, everything around there. Clearly it's detrimental. The actions that have taken place have been detrimental. The close examination of the aerial photographs, you can see there were a lot of trees removed. Somebody asked the question earlier, how many trees do you think were taken out? It's probably upwards of 50 trees that were on that eastern side of the property that were just taken out, cut down. And yet, we've been there and witnessed this firsthand, and I noticed it because, again, like Kim, I had a line sight to trees and wetlands plants, and one day it just showed up as dirt when we came out to see it. I do know that this situation needs to be resolved. It can't reside. I would encourage the zoning board to issue them a special permit to go in and do their restoration. But I too think it needs to be a very intense and comprehensive restoration. I heard the phrase before mentioned, as if nothing had happened, nothing would make me happier. We just like it to be the way it is, the way everybody else's wetlands are. Or the way it was, and the way everybody else's current wetlands are, so that we can take our community and our environment back to a natural balanced state for the ecosystem, and something that we value all very dearly. So I do appreciate you taking the time to hear my comments. I hope you take them to heart in rendering your decision on what you're going to do in this case, and thank you very much.
So did your landscaper impart to you that he gave a reason to Mr. Fitzgerald for not wanting to do the work?
He didn't want to go, I have wetlands in my property. He's aware of the boundary. There's phragmites. I'm like, he doesn't want to touch them. And I think my landscaper, who was his landscaper, said, he wanted me to cut them all down and I wouldn't do it.
It might be worth your while.
Please come up here.
It might be worth your while to come to my property at 59 Boysen and see what was before compared to what is there now. It's completely stripped, barren, nude. It's a terrible eyesore. And you should come and look at it, because seeing is believing. And you can see how much and where they piled the dirt in to make their property look bigger and made the pond look smaller and completely void of trees and vegetation. It's horrible. I mean, I was in tears when I came out and I opened the curtain and I saw everything gone without a permit, without any regard for their neighbors.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? I guess you two have covered all the bases there.
Said it all.
We're going to hold this open, obviously.
Yeah.
So this case is not going away. It'll certainly be here next month. So I'll move that we adjourn this for all purposes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Two 962 coming up. Old area. 80
I think that was the only new wetlands case on for tonight.
See you later.
The time has come.
I think Chick is telling us he would like to leave now.
I'm not
I'm
asking.
not going to let you get away with that.
I'm not asking.
Good night,
Thank you.
Chick.
Very good. Have a good night.
962 coming up.
What's the drive?
40 feet. No, 80 Post Crossing.
Oh, yeah. On the application of case number 2962, Renee and Mulberry, 80 Post Crossing.
Good evening, Matt Ivins, Suffolk Environmental, for the applicants. I am here tonight for a variance for the reconstruction and expansion of a front porch. I submitted photographs along with my application to show the existing front porch there. We're proposing to basically reconstruct it, expand it across the facade of the house, and then wrap in along the side to meet the side porch. I'm going to pass out some other photos for you guys, make it a little easier. You know what, let me just grab one more of those.
Yeah, if you have a
They'll come
copy, you can put it on the table, then they can
Okay.
get picked up by the camera. It's facing us.
Thank you. Okay. So I'll go through them real quick. On the bottom. Okay.
Picture we already have? And then-
All right, so I'm just going to go through them real quick, just to give you an idea. I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. The first one shows, obviously, the existing front porch. It also shows in blue the footprint of the proposed expansion. Second page basically gives you a side view in relation to the front of the house, how far it extends out in relation to the existing front porch. Third, fourth, and fifth give you street views, basically the existing screening from the privet. So what we're asking here for is an 8-foot variance. It's about a 20% request for relief. It's really only about maybe 3 feet further out than the existing front porch. The difficulties basically are the fact that the house itself sits about 42.5 to 44.5 feet from the front property boundary. I mean, any expansion outward, it's going to just become more of a nonconformity. I mean, I went around the neighborhood, there's about 15 residential properties up and down 80, or Post Crossing. I would say, from my point of view, there's like 12 of those houses have substantial porches, cited similarly maybe to the setback, or to the front yard property boundary. And again, I mean, you guys can see from the photos, this is so screened. I mean, you can barely see this house from the road on the first level. That's about it. I mean, I'm here to answer any and all questions.
I went down to go look at this house the other day. I recall that many years ago, my wife and I had thought about buying this house.
Yeah,
I won't tell you how long ago it was, but I'll tell you what the asking price was.
yeah,
The asking price was $21,000, and I thought it was too much money.
Yeah.
That's how smart I was, right?
yeah, that's crazy.
I'm sure it's worth,
Yeah. Well, it's
200 or
great
300
property.
times that now.
Yeah. Could have been imagined.
It's a nice house,
It's a beautiful property.
very nice area,
Yeah,
a nice street, Post Crossing.
yeah.
So this house doesn't come forward to the front yard more than others, is your argument?
Not from the aerials that I saw, no. I mean, it's pretty much in line. In fact, if you look at aerials, or you look at the Suffolk County GIS, which puts footprints of the houses, I mean, it's actually stepped back a little bit further from most of the houses along that side of Post Crossing. When you put in that front porch, it's pretty much going to line up with a lot of these houses with their front porches. I mean, I couldn't give you exact numbers, but it's pretty similar. Similar design. It's going to be the same, you know, it's going to look basically seamless. The same color as the house.
Do we have anything else? Rick, everything in this one?
No questions?
Do you have anyone out in the public who'd like to be heard of this application?
No problem here.
Decision.
I have a motion to close the decision.
So moved. All in favor? Aye.
All right, great. Thank you, board.
Yeah, I've often thought we should have bought those.
Yes, often, I guess.
Go back and bump the offer a couple thousand.
From 23?
Yeah.
They didn't have a garage, maybe that was the thing.
It
They
did have a garage, yeah. I think it's a pool house.
they had cars then.
On the application of case number 2963, Mildred Butno and trustees, 29 Ann's Lane.
For the applicant, John Bennett, and one of my clients, Maria Greenlaw, is here. And I have the affidavits of posting and mailing. And primarily what we're requesting here is to be able to put a second story over an existing garage up on the footprint of the existing garage. So I have Southampton Engineering's plans and also the Squires and Holden survey. So the property is located on the east corner of South Roscoe Drive and Ann's Lane. As you can see, it has 2 front yards. The home was constructed in 1962, and at that time, it was in the 03 zoning district. So I have a copy of the old zoning code, which shows the setbacks on it as well. I'm sure that you have copies of this in John Foster's office, and your local lawyer's office, but I give it to you for your edification. Why is that important? I think because in addition to the fact that we're not proposing any increase to the setback of this garage or as the existing patio, these proposed additions would have been would be in conformance with the old 03 zoning code, now which of course is not the applicable code now, but it certainly speaks to the character of the neighborhood and the way Roscoe Drive was developed. The applicant seeks relief from the village code, which presently requires a front yard setback of 40 feet off both frontages. The existing attached garage, as you can see, is 36 feet from Ann's Lane. This garage was thus in compliance with the village regulations at the time it was constructed, which again required a 30-foot, 5-foot front yard. In addition, the relief from 11611.1A, which requires a 60-foot rear yard, the rear yard being the yard opposite the shortest of the front yards. Interestingly, there's nothing in the village code that says that. The town code expressly says that. That's the way the building inspector has interpreted it, as long as I can remember. So we have this situation. The rear yard is the yard opposite the shorter of the 2 front yards. And the existing garage is located 44 feet from the westerly property line or the rear yard. And again, at the time the residence was constructed, a 30-foot rear yard was required, and thus the garage was in compliance with that setback. The second-story addition, which you can see, probably the best way to look at it is I think the most helpful thing is probably drawing number 7 on Steve Lemansky's plans. That's what it'll look like from the street. Raise the roof line a tad and dormer out over the garage to create additional living space. Not a significant impact on the streetscape, given the fact that the Roscoe Drive development was constructed in many instances in conformance with the 03 zoning of the code that was applicable in the early 60s. No real damage to the neighborhood. We're really going over, both with the addition to the second-story addition to the proposed second-story addition to the garage, as well as trying to get the screened-in porch, non-habitable screened-in porch to the rear of that, going over existing coverage. The existing covered patio is 44.5 feet from the westerly property line, and the proposed screened porch will encroach no further into this rear yard. I don't believe that the variances are substantial. There is a proposed pool shown, and that pool conforms to the required 20-foot side yard setback, so there's no request for relief there.
Somebody finally got it.
There's been a lot of talk about reducing that setback from 20 to 15. I'm a big supporter of it, but the trustees haven't decided to do it, so, yeah. But no, the pool is conforming. So really, I think this is I hope you'll agree, this is a rather light touch. We're staying within the existing footprints. These improvements, when they were constructed, were in conformance with the required setback in the relevant zone at the time, and therefore we don't think there's really any impact whatsoever on the neighborhood. I think this is sort of an application that speaks for itself. Again, we're going over existing improved areas that are are all, some of them in legally non-conforming areas. We're certainly not asking for any relief to come out further to either Ann's Lane or to the rear yard.
And the screen porch has a roof and such?
Yes, but it's
Of course.
not,
So
not,
can we ascertain that it will not be converted into living space in the future?
it would need further relief, but if you want, whatever you want to protect against that, consider it done. If you want a covenant or something like that. I mean,
Well, I haven't spoken with my colleagues on it.
I mean, it would have to come back to you. I'm specifically asking for a screen porch. I'm not asking for habitable space there, but anything you need to make sure that that doesn't happen, that's fine with us too, because that's all we're asking for, so.
You hear from the neighbors on this application, Will? I see there's a request in the file for FOIL, but I don't see others.
To be quite frank with everybody, there was some neighborhood concern about a dog that the family was keeping, and that is no longer an issue, and I think that tamped down some of the neighbors' ire, so to speak.
Did the dog die?
The dog is there. Tonight, it's there.
Excuse me?
The dog's there.
No, she's has not left us.
Oh.
We are containing her. She is contained. We have an invisifence.
How does a dog affect the application?
I don't think the dog is within our
I
purview.
don't think the dog is in the purview. I think people were suggesting that if there wasn't some sort of remedy about the offending dog, there would be opposition to the variance. So that's why I think the FOIL was there, but there was no FOIL.
Okay.
I think that's-
So there's no letter or anything that I can find in the file.
That's a first.
Mr. Foster asked me what we could do about remedying the dog situation. I bought him a box of dog biscuits the other day. He seemed to think that was
Make him happy?
no, I think he got the humor in it, but
Dog or Mr. Foster?
both of them. But, yeah, I don't think, the dog issue aside, I don't think that, and I don't think that there's any nexus between the two, obviously, but I also don't think, from a point of view of impact on the neighborhood, that this is very significant, so.
You have any questions?
Visible fence.
No.
Rick?
Just one question. In looking at the plans, maybe I missed it somewhere, I don't see any data, the floor area of the existing house and the proposed floor area additions to the house.
We can provide that. We'll provide that before the, I'm confident that it complies with the GFA, but if you could.
Oh, I'm not concerned about that.
I'm
Just
so
in relation
sorry.
to the 50% clause, we usually get,
Oh, okay. We can, well, just sort of, I guess, Rick, and forgive me, but just sort of eyeballing it didn't even.
Oh, it's pretty
close.
obvious.
But I'll get you the percentages.
It's pretty obvious
But you
that,
need the percentages, yeah.
but even though something's obvious, I like to see the data.
Absolutely. I was if I can get you that, if I could ask that.
We'll get it before the work session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think the meeting is the 25th. The work session then would be 9 days before that, which would be the 16th.
May 16th, okay.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to hear this application?
Good evening. I'm Ernest Chervy. I live directly across the street on the corner of Roscoe Drive and Ann's Lane. And although there was a joke made about the dog, and it was the first few people to hear about a dog, I have no objection to the request, except that more covered property, that being the covered porch and the pool, there's less room for this violent dog to roam. And although you heard it was contained, there is a file, a report of the dog going through the fence and attacking another dog. So, and that was just less than 2 weeks ago. So I would be in favor of the request if there was a fence for the dog that he couldn't go through. I have fallen myself in fear of running from this dog because it's left outside in the dark and you don't know where this dog is going. So although this is not your jurisdiction, it does impact what goes on in that property. Thank you.
Anybody else would like to be heard? So we're going to hold this open
You can actually
or close it pending?
close it for decision subject to submission of the floor area data.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
John's presentation, they taught the dog to swim in the pool a lot. Roscoe people are always having their yards, man.
Yeah. Well, those are all the, you can use it, I don't care.
I'm using the 9.
There's only 16, yeah, so I got 2 of them.
I think 1 Coke a month. No?
1 Coke a month.
1 Coke a month. Let's see it. Yeah.
What's wrong with it?
Does it?
Yes.
Forget that. You're swimming upstream as it is.
On the application of case 2964, Christopher and Jean Lynch, 58 Roscoe Drive.
The applicant, John Bennett. The affidavit of billing and posting. So we get set up here, get some of this stuff out of the way. This is sort of a, in the old days, we call this a classic practical difficulty. You have a situation where there's a house there's a lot with 3 front yards. And as you all know, the village code doesn't provide any automatic relief for that. So we're here to request some relief primarily for the pool. Actually, maybe a bit for this proposed front entrance porch, but primarily for the pool. Now, the most important thing is that the pool, as it relates to the neighbor, does conform with the 20-foot setback requirement. We submitted an aerial photograph of the property to show that, among other things, pools are a very common accessory structure in the area. Essentially, a house without a pool seems to be the exception to the rule in this area. The property is currently improved with a residence that does not comply with the required setbacks. It's proposed to be demolished and improved with a residence that complies with all front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, and pyramid law setbacks. So the house itself, other than that request for an entrance porch at 35.8 feet from the property line, will comply with the required setbacks. So I think the pre-existing non-conforming residence maintaining a front yard of 32.7 feet off Roscoe Drive. So this proposal will reduce this existing non-conformity, other than, of course, that request for the 35.8-foot entrance porch, which is, albeit not in conformance with the current code, will be less non-conforming than the existing setback and certainly not be spread throughout the entire width of the house. You see the house itself currently is at 32.7. The proposed entrance porch is at 35.8, but the entire house is at 32.7. The house will be is being constructed to comply in toto with the required setbacks. So hopefully the board will agree that that's a decrease in the nonconformities, which is a good thing. Again, there are the 3 front yards, so that creates an issue. We would like relief to have a pool. Again, we're holding 20.3 feet to the neighbor, which I think is the most, the setback that the board tends to be, not that the board isn't concerned with all setbacks, but tends to be most primarily concerned with. That's which is the setback to the neighbor, the idea that the distance from the property line to the pool mitigates any noise. The setback to the pool along Roscoe Drive is close to conforming at 44.7, and importantly, it is behind the house, just barely, but nevertheless behind the house. The real relief in terms of magnitude, and again, I respectfully submit it's not a significant magnitude, is the 30 feet setback to the other portion of Roscoe Drive to the south, the southerly part of the property. It's sort of interesting to note, again, based upon that 03 zoning code, that this would have complied. And again, I'm not suggesting that this is the applicable code, but it does sort of help in terms of the way, the character of the neighborhood, in terms of the way the property was developed. And again, if I've missed something in this older code, Rick's has better knowledge of it than I do. And so if I've misstated something, Rick will tell me. And I just took a fairly studied look at it in terms of what that code said about structures in the front yard. It's tough to find any accessory structures there, primarily because the accessory structures that the code dealt with, that 03 code dealt with, were buildings. So the 03 code says that you can't have an accessory building forward of the house. My purpose for saying, but this is not a building, it's a structure. So, but again, the 03 code is not the existing code, but in terms of the character of the neighborhood, the way the Roscoe Drive area was developed, this pool would have been permitted under the old code when this was developed. The village doesn't have this section, but a lot of municipalities, including the town of Southampton, say that when you have a lot on a filed map, you use the code that was in existence at the time the map was filed. I'm not suggesting that we have that code. I'm just saying it's not the most outrageous thing to argue that it's important to look at the code that existed at the time the map was filed and developed. So we have a situation where just about any place you want to put a pool on this property would require a variance, but the most troublesome request for variances you get are relief from the 20 feet to the neighbor, and we've conformed with that. There was a prior application to put a pool on this property. It was more expansive. It was a 20 by 40 pool. It was withdrawn. And it did not contemplate a redevelopment of the property. Thus, the non-conforming house was going to remain where it was. We don't have the same situation here where the proposed house is going to be, the existing house will be torn down and the new house will conform, all with the exception of that proposed entryway. So again, we have the ability to bring everything into conformance except that code, except that the pool, and I think we're getting pretty darn close. In terms of, and again, every situation is different, but I thought the board may be interested in two prior decisions. One is the Malcolm Braverman decision, and the other one is the Ingoglia decision. Give those up for the board's consideration.
Why was my name mentioned?
You got a pool at one time, and you got a variance at one time.
Oh, right,
That's why he's mentioned it.
Thank you.
So there's the Braverman decision, which holds a 42-foot and a 42-foot setback. Similar situation as a 42-foot setback. So relief was given. Front yard variance, excuse me? Application for a front yard variance in order to permit a proposed swimming pool in a front yard from South Roscoe Drive. Subject lot is a lot having its physical frontage on Adams Lane. The proposed pool is located in the rear yard from a practical point of view, although technically also a front yard from South Roscoe Drive. So that's, that the board was kind enough to grant Mr. Brodman that decision. And then there's a decision, of this Ingoglia decision, which is over on Moses and Fox Hollow. Again, there's a front yard relief was granted. And that, and what I would argue would be similar circumstances, actually probably even less compelling circumstances because there weren't I guess there are 3 front yards there, aren't there? Yeah. So the front yard variance was granted in that instance as well.
Well, you have to go look at that property to see why.
Oh, no, I understand, but you have the 3 front yards, such as here, and I'm not, and again, I give you these, so it's not unusual or unreasonable for me to make the request for
I
that.
think you've heard us, though, in the last year, had several applications for pools that didn't meet setbacks, and you turned down.
The thing that I've heard a lot is you can't meet that 20-foot setback because that's as it relates to the neighbors. But you have a situation here where you have 3 front yards. I'm pretty darn close to meeting the setback on this. If you want, I can go back to the client and see if they can.
There's also been stated here that some properties cannot support a pool. This is one of those. Cannot support a pool.
Well,
Yeah,
Can't support a pool.
neighbors have pools.
Neighbors have pools. There's pools all over the place. You've given front yard variances requests in
We
this.
learn as we go along.
Yeah, well, Kevin, I think, what if I took this, if I put this back to 50 feet, it'll be like a 30-foot pool, and then I'll only need the one request for
It'll
relief.
still be in the front yard.
Well, I don't think it's fair to say the board has never granted front yard pool variances. You have quite a history of doing that.
This property cannot support a pool. It can support a house, and that's all. They're entitled to a house, and they're going to get a house. It does not support a pool.
I guess I would respectfully ask what would be the harm? Because what would be the harm
In the
to,
front yard.
We'll address that.
but
It's got 3 front yards. They knew that when they bought the property.
no, I know all of that,
3
but
front
that,
yards, you're very restricted to what you can do.
But that didn't prohibit other people with
They had
3
3
front
front
yards and
yards?
2 front. Yes, the one I just showed you had.
I told you, go look at that property.
I did look at the property.
Why they got it.
I did understand and look at the property. I don't know how it's functionally different than this in terms of an intellectual analysis as to the fact that there are 3 front yards and the board granted relief for the front yard setback. I mean, I know there are lots that can't support a pool. I'm well aware of that. There are, we probably one this evening. It was
Yeah, we did one,
45,
yeah.
50 feet, but that's not the situation here. You have three front yards, which is a textbook, in the old parlance, practical difficulty. You have a neighborhood that's full of pools. You've met the setback to the neighbor, which is the one that I follow this board as closely as anybody, and which is the one that I think you folks have been the most concerned about giving relief from. And I guess I would just sort of, respectfully disagree that this is not one of those textbooks. I look at, there are plenty of lots that I know exactly what you're saying, and I can't disagree with your often made statement, this lot can't support a pool. I know there are lots like that in the village. I'm not arguing that every lot in the village deserves a pool. I just would respectfully suggest, based upon some of your prior conduct and based upon the circumstances that this isn't one of them.
And I look at that as a busy corner with a road that comes right up into it. So it's like you got a road coming this way, and then you're wrapped with the road, and then the pool is right there. So it's this is like more in your face than
Well, you could-
That's more of the problem here, and, because it's in the front yard, it's out there where the roads are, it's,
On the other hand, you're removing the driveway from Roscoe Drive and putting it on Adams Lane, I think. That makes it conform with that whole run of Adams Lane much better and calms that a little bit.
Absolutely. And I thank you for that comment. I don't, I try to winnow these cases out before they come to me, and there are many times I suggest to people, don't even ask for it. This was not one of them. I thought, based upon what the board had done in the past, and I may have misanalyzed it, I apologize if I did, but I still would sort of stick to my guns. I don't think that this is a situation that's terribly different from some of the relief that you've granted in the past. And Dan, the fact that the pool is out there in those intersections, that may be fine, but that incapacitates the automobile
well,
driver.
you get kids on bikes, you get cars coming around, and it's a busy corner. I don't know if you're going to have a 4-foot fence around it, how it's going to be screened. There's a lot of issues that I have. The pool is sort of like in the public on this location to me than in other cases that you're presenting, and that's where I have the concern.
Okay.
The rear of the house, are you using that as a side yard? Okay. That's why the setbacks are what they are.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not technically a side yard, as you know.
No,
It's
I
a
know,
front
but are
yard.
you using that as a side yard?
Yeah,
As
exactly.
far as the
Exactly.
setbacks go?
Exactly.
Yeah, because if it was a rear yard, that had to be different, wouldn't it?
Right. And again, the way I sort of looked at this in terms of the things that you generally like to see, I looked at there was a prior request that had been withdrawn, so I clearly wanted to make this application less of a stretch, number one, and number two, I did like the fact that the house that was being rebuilt, the house that was being built was going to conform, and with the exception of that little roof patio, which I will add if that creates an issue. The applicant has told me that they'll just take that away. I don't know. I guess I'm sort of scratching my head. If it's the applicant's desire to have the pool there, I guess they would be the only ones that would be impacted by, passenger traffic in the area. It's not going to be. Why do you have these setbacks for a pool? You have the setbacks for the pool primarily, I think, to mitigate the noise from the pool.
I think it's a privacy factor, too.
But the privacy is a factor for the person using the pool in the bathing suit. It's not a factor for the person walking by the house.
There's a lot of pool activities. You end up with chairs and umbrellas and towels and everything. It's all in the front yard. So that's part of, the attractiveness of a pool in the backyard is that doesn't impact everybody either. That's
Yeah, you can't argue.
You're
You can't argue with
barbecuing,
that.
there's
I understand.
music, there's everything is happening, and it's more public.
It's not just the pool, it's the stuff that goes with it. I understand.
Right.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I can't argue with that. But again, I think you have that situation wherever you grant a front yard pool variance. Which if this was one of those things where you always held the line, where, for example, I know enough to tell people never to ask this board for a lot coverage. There's a lot of things that you guys are very consistent on certain things, and that's why I thought, given some of the relief you have granted in the past, that this would not be an aggressive request. But maybe I can try to show you some screening. Maybe I'll look and see whether or not there's some reduction we can make here. I know the original request was for a 20 by 40 pool. Maybe we can make the pool somewhat smaller. Let me take a look at it. Let me go back and talk to my client and see if we can come back with something that's maybe less problematic.
Show an aggressive screening plan or something?
Absolutely.
It looks like a rear yard, in effect, to me.
It's kind of in a no man's land with that turn also, I don't think it's going to bother anybody, but.
But if you have a heavy screening plan, maybe that'll help. too,
Yeah.
you know,
Let me come back with a serious, specified, unequivocal screening plan, not just a row of, plantings shown on a surveyor's plan. Let me give you something serious.
I will
Show the
comment.
fencing, because, there's fencing and gating and besides, so.
Interestingly enough, I don't know, it's a very, very old stockade fence. The house has a CO, but there's a 6-foot stockade fence along some of those, some of the property line. So I'm not suggesting, maybe some of that can come down and be replaced with screening. So I'll take a look at it, and I'll obviously explain to the client your concerns, which I understand.
Let me comment on the 20.3 you have from the property line. That's only 3 or 4 inches leeway, and if they make a mistake, we're not happy about those mistakes anymore. So it's tight. Make sure the pool contractor does it right. There's no leeway there.
I couldn't agree with you more. I wish I had $1 for every time I said to a client, and make sure the surveyor stakes the line. And there's a difference between offsets and where the pool is supposed to go. I wish I had $1 for every time I tried to stress that to somebody. Don't go out there with a tape measure. Have the surveyor stake the line. But I appreciate the admonishment. It's a good one.
We have a letter here from Robert Smith in opposition.
Oh, if I may, I'm sorry. My apologies. I did want to speak a little bit about Mr. Smith's letter of opposition. I read his letter, and we don't need any relief as it relates to Mr. Smith. And one of the things.
You don't need any relief as it relates to the house, except for the front entryway?
Well, no, Mr. Smith is to the north, I believe. There's no request for relief. Wouldn't even be request for any relief whatsoever towards Mr. Smith. Everything would conform. And one of the things Mr. Smith was concerned about is he didn't want to see he didn't want to have to look out at a garage. So, you got to be careful when you live in a glass house and throw stones. That's Mr. Smith's house. So he obviously doesn't have a concern about a garage facing. And I don't mean to try to be small or petty about it, but if you're going to say, I don't want to look at a garage, you can't have a house that has a garage facing the street.
Maybe he doesn't look at his.
Maybe he doesn't look at his.
He didn't see it.
But anyway, so I'll go back, and I understand everyone's concerned, and I appreciate
This
you letting.
proposed house, how many bedrooms?
I don't know, but let me find out.
5 plus a gym.
5 plus a gym?
I don't know. I don't know whether or not that's truth. Why don't I just get the
Yeah, well, I think we'll need those. It's going to have a garage?
Yep.
Which will take care of how many cars, 2?
Of course.
Providing for 6 spaces.
I'll get the info.
All right.
5 bedrooms needs 4 spaces.
Yeah, it's the number of bedrooms minus 1, I think is.
Right.
I don't think there'd be any problem complying with that, given the about 5-year-old amendment to the village code. Why don't we show you that as well?
Show us what?
I'll get to show you that as well. There for the spaces and maybe and the buffering for that. I'll give you a complete site plan for that.
Okay.
Yeah, it goes around.
What does it?
Yeah, I think so, right?
I guess so.
It goes right into his garage. He's worried about this, the garage, but he doesn't need any relief on this side.
Let me see.
Okay.
Rick, did you have anything?
Just one question. When we received this at the work session, we remembered that there was a prior application for a swimming pool on this property in what we thought was a similar location. We also remembered, we couldn't remember whether it was denied or whether it was withdrawn after clear vibes from the zoning board that they were not in favor of it. or what? So I would like you to provide,
I spoke to Gil today, he said he handled it, it was withdrawn.
okay, but we would like to see the prior application and the survey showing where it was proposed, and also the minutes from the hearings to see if there were board comments, because we all had a recollection that that was one that we were not looking favorably on.
I looked.
And as you know, sometimes people come before us,
Right.
they feel out the board, they hear negative vibes from the board, and they withdraw the application.
No, sure. I looked for the application. I found the application, Rick. It was a 20 by 40 pool. There's no survey. I can't find a survey. The building department can't find a survey for the application. So I don't know whether it was one meeting and they pulled it out very quickly. I don't know. I'll take another look. But one of the things I
Look for whatever you can find. Certainly there'll be minutes.
Yep, okay. But again,
Did you say Gil Flanagan handled it?
I spoke to Gil today about it. He
I
said
don't
he
remember
was
him
doing
being the one that handled it, but...
it. Okay, well, maybe.
But I could be wrong. My memory's not like it used to be,
Neither's mine.
getting a little older.
I think I remember the conversation was just this afternoon.
But certainly there's got to be minutes.
Yeah, I'll look for those. I'll look for those. But again, I was aware that it was a 20 by 40 pool, so we reduced the size of it. I also was trying to distinguish this application by the fact that the entire property is being redeveloped and the nonconformities as it relates to the house, with the exception of a little bit of relief that I want for the entryway, those are all going away. And who knows, maybe there wasn't a more detailed planting plan, but I'll look for the minutes. I did look for and find the application. The building department, strangely enough, doesn't have a survey for it, but I'll look again.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to refer to this application?
Yes, I would. My name is Robert Smith, and I live across the street, and I did submit that letter to the members of the board. I have never opposed anything, and this is the first time I've ever been here. A lot of development has occurred in our neighborhood. All of it, okay, new construction, okay, and amendments to existing structures, but for the most part, new, big homes with pool houses, with separated garages, two-story houses. Not once have I raised an opposition, including the house that was built right next to me on an empty lot, which was 2 stories. All of them conformed with the code. Not a single house that I am aware of that has been built in the Roscoe development has sought a variance. When I bought my house 20 years ago, okay, I have 2 front yards also. So if you want to point out about my garage, also point out my pool is 50-foot setback off of Roscoe Drive, which I was required to do, okay, not asked to do. The only way I could have a pool, okay, was to set it 50 feet off of Roscoe Drive and behind my house. This pool, the property is what it is. It's 3 front yards intersecting with 4 roads. Raymond's Lane, South Roscoe, Roscoe Drive. In fact, it should be a village green. Mr. Roscoe, when he was selling his lots at 2,500, I guess wanted to maximize. Today, that would be a village green, not a place for a house. The road go right into that place where they are putting a pool. The issue is also, okay, this document, which was used for notification, is false. Right on its face, it says, proposed 1-story home. Lot coverage, 2,900 square feet. When you go to the property office, you see a 2-story house with 5 bedrooms, a gym, 33 foot high roof line, maximum coverage, 3,914 feet. Proposed house, 3,914 square feet. To the inch, they are building out this lot in terms of the lot coverage. Then they just want to throw in the pool. as the only issue, okay? This is a huge house being built on a lot that is unsuitable for this property and this pool. That is my position on it. I think it's a mistake, horrible precedent, okay? I mean, pools in front yards don't belong. This is not a technicality. These are 3 front yards, abounding on 4 separate streets: Raymond's Lane, South Roscoe, Roscoe Drive, and Adams Lane. The fact that I don't like getting a garage where I don't have a garage, and which is going to be double width, okay, is something that I basically said doesn't violate anything, and I am not suggesting that this board has anything to say about it. However, I believe that this person bought the house knowing fair well that it had 3 front yards. It was rejected not once, but twice, okay? If you talk to the people in the building department, for 5 years this house has been on the market, and for 5 years the owner of this property has been trying to get a pool so he could sell the house. It's sold at a discounted price because of this problem. It was purchased with full knowledge of this problem, and now the owner wants to build a maximum size house, and he wants relief from this board. In the notices that were given out, misrepresentation. This is not what is being proposed. The house is 3,914 square feet. This says proposed 1 story. A lot of my neighbors said, why bother coming? This is a small little matter. Nowhere does he suggest that this is a 2-story house that's going up.
I don't know why that error is there. But it does say proposed 1-story house.
Yeah, and I will remind council that he also filed a sworn affidavit that this is accurate.
All right, let me respond, but let's stop it. This is the history on it. I filed an application. The speaker is correct. The survey was an error. But I also filed the building plans. I called and I have to tell you, one of the things I didn't get to in the notes that my associate wrote up for my presentation, she said, remind the board that the survey is an error. So I apologize for that. There's absolutely no intent to deceive. I filed the complete building plans with the application, which show a 2-story house.
Then how come you sent out your notice without, okay, showing that it was a 2-story house?
Okay. When you can demonstrate that you've lived your life perfectly, I'll listen to your criticisms.
Well, it does cause a little confusion, John.
Well, signed an affidavit, sir.
Oh, please.
It causes confusion.
Excuse me. I understand that. I understand that, Kevin, and I absolutely understand that. The surveyor was in
He
error.
goes and sees a proposed 1-story, then he comes here and here it's going to be 2 stories.
No. If he goes to the building, I filed the building plans which show a 2-story house.
You're required to give notice so
I'm
that
not going
you
to
don't
be.
have to
I'm
go
not
to
going to
the
be
building
upbraided by
department.
a man who doesn't like a garage when he's.
I understand your point.
Okay, my point is, none of you have to deal with inaccurate information.
But
at
the
these
house
hearings.
he's proposing, as he described it tonight, meets the setbacks except for the front entryway.
By a square inch.
That's what they
All
do
right.
these days. They build out to the maximum.
He's asking for 20-foot variance on the front yard setback for the pool, 5 additional feet, okay, from the other front yard. Okay, 2 variances. He's not 50 feet back on the pool anywhere.
Well, I think as you've heard here tonight, the bone of contention is the pool.
Exactly.
It certainly is for me, the bone of contention is the pool.
The owner should either be modest, build a smaller house with a pool, or build a house that he wants, a big house, without a pool. It's his choice.
A smaller house would still require front yard relief.
No, it wouldn't. Here's a worker at the building department showed a pool, okay, that would meet the setback requirements behind the house, okay, with a little front, okay?
And we have
Reduce the sun.
variances in Roscoe, by the way, with 2 front yards being the reason.
Could fit it if he wanted to fit it.
I just, yeah.
maybe maybe there's a way of making it conform to the 50-foot street setback, but it would still need a variance to be in a front yard.
Front yard, correct.
The front yard is the space between the house and the street, regardless of how big the front yard is. Even if the house is 200 feet from the street, you can't have a swimming pool in the front yard.
But Roscoe Drive for me is a front yard, correct?
Well, they're all front yards.
Okay, but if you go 50 feet and the pool is behind my house, no one said I couldn't have that pool.
Well, you don't have
It's not a
three front
yard.
yards.
It was a-
I know.
That was a
I have
rear
2
yard.
front yards, but I still, okay, it's considered a front yard. My backyard is considered a front yard because it runs along Roscoe. And I have to have a 50-foot setback.
You have 2 front yards.
Right,
This property has 3 front yards.
exactly.
So there is no location for a swim. That's one of the reasons why the chairman indicated that this house property doesn't support a swimming pool.
Well, if you make the house smaller, okay, and
No matter if you made the house 1 square foot,
You can't have a pool in the front
you
yard.
can't have a pool between the house and any street. So it would need a variance. He could get a greater setback.
But if you showed at least 50-foot setbacks from both front yards, at least you would have a stronger argument to say,
Yes.
at least we're meeting the setbacks.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Here we go, we're going to hold this one open for all purposes.
Please.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Please come up.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Fred Weinfurt. I reside at 45 Roscoe Drive, diagonally across the street from the subject property. I want to go on the record as being opposed to the variances being requested here this evening. Although I understand that this is a hearing regarding a swimming pool, setbacks, et cetera, for the pool, and also a porch, I think it is very important that we examine the entire scope of what's proposed here and why there is a need for the variances. From the information I've gathered from the various documents, building plans that have been submitted to the building department, and as Mr. Smith has brought out, the maximum allowable square footage of living area on this parcel is 3,914 feet. Proposed dwelling, 3,914 feet. I understand there's also a proposed garage, 520 square feet. And it's my understanding that since this is an attached garage, it does not go into the calculation of gross living area. However, it is part of the structure. And if included, it would bring the entire mass, if you will, of this structure to 4,434 square feet on this lot. A very large structure. Which leads me back to the need for a variance. The house is too big to legally accommodate the amenities the applicant desires in this application. I understand it is the intent of the applicant to demolish the existing structure, which is a ranch house. Therefore, he'll start with a clean slate and can configure this property and the structures on it to conform with code. There is no hardship here. It seems to me that the assumption you can build out the maximum square footage on a piece of property and then just come in for the amenities, a variance is easy to obtain. Build it out. And I think that's a problem that's happened in this village for some time. I'm a native, by the way. This property is a bit unique, and as was brought out previously, because 4 roads at various points approach this property. Roscoe Drive, Adams Lane, Raymond's Lane, and South Roscoe. It is a focal point in our community. Most of the homes surrounding this subject are ranch houses and modest capes. This proposed structure will be out of place and not in keeping. I've heard the comment used this evening, character of the neighborhood. This will dramatically impact the character of the Roscoe community. I feel that since there is no hardship here, one other point I want to raise. I understand recently the village board did approve some restrictions to the code that would address some situations where the magnitude of the house would be in question, the size of the house would be in question. I understand that this is in Albany now for ratification, I'm told. I feel that since there is no hardship here other than the one created by the applicant himself due to the size of this structure, he has two options. Scale back the size of the home to accommodate the desired amenities, or eliminate the items that require a variance. Since he is starting from scratch, he shouldn't have it both ways, one or the other. I bring up, too, with the notice that's been given to the neighbors concerning this meeting tonight, that yes, I feel the survey that was submitted is misleading. Shows a one-story dwelling. And I'm sure some people would say, I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. It's got a nice hedge in front of it. It's only one story. It's only a pool variance. Again, I encourage the committee to look at the scope of this project and what's in question here. This is going to be a very big home and stick out, not attractively, in the neighborhood. I thank you for your time, and I hope you will consider my comments.
Well, once again, the only variances that he's asking for is the pool
Understand that.
and the front
Scope.
porch.
It's the scope of the project I'm concerned about. I think that's a component, if I may, and one of the things I'm concerned about, I think when these things are reviewed, they're reviewed in pieces. Because if this variance is granted, the house complies with zoning. I think it's interesting that the pyramid, if you look at the back roof line, that back roof line runs right along the pyramid line. You couldn't shoehorn this thing in any better than that architect did. My hat's off to him. But you know what? Doesn't fit in our neighborhood.
Yeah, but see, if the house conforms, we have no say over it. He's not asking for variances for the house except for the front porch.
Understand that. So therefore, don't grant the variance for the pool. If he wants to build his house,
Well, as you've heard and I said before, the pool is the contentious item here.
yes.
Well, why isn't the porch contentious then?
Well, it should be due to the mass of
It
the
doesn't
structure.
create noise.
But it's a tabula rasa, it's a clean slate, there's no hardship.
Well,
Exactly.
we can deny the porch if you want. We can do that.
I think,
Nonconformity, though.
Huh?
He's reducing the nonconformity of the existing house.
but it's a single,
You tend to reward that.
He is reducing the nonconformity compared with
Once
the
you
existing
demolish
house.
a house, there is no
You gotta come up here.
nonconformity.
no, let me just say this. The non-conforming part is a little jut where the two bedrooms used to stick out. And I think probably at the time it conformed to zoning.
Yes.
This is minor when you consider the mass of the proposed structure. Granted, yes, that little, where it protrudes out in the front where the bedrooms are in the house, you don't even notice that from the street. Well, you're going to notice this house from the street, and then some.
Well, when it comes to mass, that's the ARB's
Understand.
responsibility.
But as I say, I hope you take that into consideration.
What we're
That if,
concerned with is the setbacks. That's
understand. And I
the
understand.
gross floor area.
And I understand that, yes. But because of that size of the dwelling, I don't think you should be granted the variance for the pool.
Well, we're concerned about that, too.
Thank you.
We're very concerned about the pool.
Good. I thank you for your time.
So we're going to
Adjourn for all purposes.
adjourn for all purposes.
So moved.
All in favor?
Gosh.
I move that this meeting of the Southampton Village Zoning Board of Appeals, April 2017, be closed.
Second.
All in favor?